So CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheets. Remember to know your acronyms for the quiz next week. And the intent of CSS is to, as it suggests, is to style the content of the page, right? To make it look or transform the look and feel to be something other than the default look and feel. CSS is its own language that has become, fairly dominant, fairly important skill to learn. Now, most of the times as developers, we might spend most of our time implementing HTML and using somebody else's style, or so somebody who dedicates their career at making things look pretty, right? And they'll give us a style sheet and says, this is a style sheet. Use these classes and apply these classes to your input, to your content, and it'll look spectacular. Nevertheless, we're going to have some. We're going to learn enough to use CSS. We're not going to be designers here, mostly to understand how the mechanism works and how to use a style sheet that might be given to us and how we might apply it. So at the beginning, there was no CSS, right? It was just plain old HTML. And HTML was a mixture of logical page layout, right? That allow you to lay out the page logically, and also a lot of the styling elements in there, such as to make things bold or underline, or select a font or colors and things like that. Eventually, it became such an important skill to have that it became its own career. And it became its own language, right? So that you can spend all your career just doing CSS and making things that look wonderful, and so also it became important that it would be easy to change the style of multiple pages. So a lot of techniques have evolved over time, and the consensus is that styling should not live inside of your pages. Instead, it should live in some dedicated file that can then be linked into your HTML page so that it can be easily distributed amongst multiple pages, and you can style multiple pages all at once, right? Nevertheless, you can still do things such as styling a particular element using this style attribute. Style, I want to change the color of this paragraph to make it color green. So I can change the foreground color of this text, right? And the syntax of what's inside of this style attribute is CSS, right? That's the syntax, the language that's in there. Now this is considered to be bad practice, right? That you go in and style an actual element, right, all the way down to an element. This makes it very hard to maintain. Right, that a particular style only lives in that one element. If I ever want to override it or change it, this style, because it's the closest to the element, is going to always override whatever I try to do from the outside. Well, unless I do import and things like that. But nevertheless, it's a maintenance nightmare. So don't do it. It's only maybe for you to play around and see what something looks like real quick, right? But nevertheless, in a project, you would never do something like this, right? Typically, somebody might, when you do a code review, somebody might balk at this and say, well, no, move this to a style sheet. Yes?
Does it override just the quality that you're specifying there? Or
yeah, only that. Yes. Yep. Only what you specify here. And you can do semicolon and separate it on several other attributes that you want to operate. Slightly better than this is declaring it in the same page, in the same web page, but in a style tag, in the style tag in the header of the documents, right? Where you can refer to elements in the page and say, hey, you see that paragraph over there? I want to transform it and I want to center it. I want to center the content. I want to align the text and make it centered. Okay? This is slightly better, right? But again, still considered to be a bad practice. It lives in the page. Right, and to change this content, I actually need to open the document and go in and fix it. Okay, what's unanimously considered to be a best practice is to instead use a link tag. Right, a link tag that I can then reference an actual file outside of this file, right, and say, hey, that's the style for this page, all right? And so I can change the style without actually modifying this document. So this document is self-contained. I don't have to touch it, right? From the outside, I can transform it. This is referred to, anyway, this document would contain lots and lots of these style transformations, right? These are referred to as transformations, where these are transformation rules that say, hey, wherever you find in the document, wherever you find this piece of content, right, apply the following transformations, right? Whatever the default text align attribute is for that part of the document, convert it into being this instead, center, right? The default is to be left justified. Okay, so this is changing the text alignment to be centered. Okay, so these are rules, right? So there's a rule. There's the name of the rule. This is what's called a selector, right? It allows you to select elements that live in the document. It allows you to refer to document elements, right? And then apply the transformation, right? This is the transformation, convert it. And you can have any number of transformations here, all separated by semicolon. Okay? So here's several transformations. Transforming this paragraph to be the background equal to yellow. This paragraph converting the background to be blue and the foreground color to be white. Notice the separation, semicolon. Here's a background to be red and the color to be white. Or slightly better, we're taking these paragraphs, right, and instead of putting the transformation right on the element, we have moved those transformations over to the style tag. You see that? Right. So this is slightly better, and the way we refer to the elements down here is by, again, using what it's called a selector. Right. The selector allows you to refer to portions of the document and then say, if you find this portion of the document, apply the following transformation. All right. Now, there's several ways that you can refer to elements in the document. You can refer to them by the name of the element, right? P. You can refer to them by the class that is applied to it. You can refer to it by the ID, the unique identifier. Okay. We used the unique identifier earlier. Yes. Here we are using the class. The class, notice that each one has a class. The class for this P is background dash yellow. You see that? Right? And this one is background blue and this is background red. Actually, this has two. This has background blue and another class, color white. So you can apply multiple classes to the same element. Right? All right, let's look at these rules up here. Notice that it says that there's dot here. See that dot? Yes.
When would you ever use ID over class aside from like it's best practice for ID?
Yeah, really ID. There's no need for using. There's nothing that you can do with an ID that you can also use with a class. You just need to be a little more rigorous with classes, and you can achieve the same thing with that you would achieve with IDs. Other than forcing something to appear only once in a page, right, and validate it using JavaScript.
Right.
Yeah.
What gets prioritized?
IDs get prioritized because they're unique. Yeah, it's the only element that has that ID. Yeah, whereas there might be multiple elements that have the same class. So IDs have priority. Yep. All right. So notice we have several transformations, and so notice the dot here. Dot means I'm looking for elements that have a class, so that's what the dot means. I'm looking for elements that have a class called blue-yellow. Right? Notice the naming convention also. We use dashes here. Okay? Whereas in Java we might use camel casing and whatnot. In HTML we would use dashes. So all right. So is there an element that has a class called background yellow? Yes, there it is, background yellow. And the transformation is to change the background color to be yellow. There it is. So that's yellow. Blue, red, right? So these are all blue, red. Plus, here's another transformation, another class that says, look for an element whose class is color white. Change the foreground to be white. See that? So both transformations are being applied to this blue here, and this red one are receiving two transformations, right? Blue, white, red, white. Yes? Right, and you can have any number of combination of of transformations. So instead of doing either one of these, right, either this, that, instead of you doing this, the best implementation is to instead move all those transformations outside, right, to a separate file, and perhaps a file called style.css, and have those rules there as opposed to in the style element, and bring them in to the page using the link tag and say, okay, well, I'm going to load that style.css, load it in here, right? I'm going to declare as a style sheet, right? And then all those rules will apply to this document just as if they were locally. Make sense? Now there's some like someone mentioned here, there are some prioritization on all these rules, because some of these rules might collide, right? There could be one rule that wants the background to be blue, and then another rule that also applies wants it to be red. So there has to be a mechanism for collision. You know, how you resolve rules that are colliding, right, and are inconsistent. So the simplest rule is that the closest one wins, right? So for instance, this one would win over, you know, this style here would win over, for instance, you know, this one that is on in the style, right? And these in the style tag would win over things that are declared in a separate file. So the farther out you are from the actual element that you're transforming, you know, the less is your priority. Okay. Other rules might be how specific is your rule. For instance, if you're using a class and you're using an ID, a class is more generic and an ID is much more specific, right? So if they both are colliding, you would choose the ID versus the class, right? So there's a whole bunch of other specifications. You know, also if here you can combine dots, background yellow, you can combine it with also, you can put a P in front of this, right? And you say, well, I only want the P's who have this class to have this transformation. So that's more specific to just having the class. Yes? It says I want the paragraphs, meaning I don't want the headers, I don't want the divs, I don't want the input fields, I only want the P's, the paragraphs. Make sense? So that's more specific. So the more specific it is, the higher your priority if you have rules that are colliding with one another. Make sense? Yes? Then the order of the document, you know, the one that gets that is declared later overrides the one that is declared earlier. Yeah. Last one wins. And also the box model. The box model, every element that renders on the browser, right, is given some rectangular area to render, right, and every piece of content has these four portions, right. You have the actual content that's going to be rendered, right, any text, any image, any rectangular area in the browser, right, is referred to as the content. Around it, you have a optional padding, right? This is space between everything else and the actual content, right? And you can control the left padding, the top padding, bottom, right. Okay. Around that, you can have a border, like a solid border or a dotted border, right? Or and you have a colored border that you can go around. Again, you can control independently the left, the right, the top, the bottom border, right? And around that, you have the margins, right? Anything that you can push away, any other elements that you want to have space between them, right? And you can use all three of them, right, to specify all the width and the height of this element, okay? So a trick question might be, given this content, this padding, this border, and this margin, what is the total width, right, that is rendered on the page, right? And it's always, right, the addition of the margin plus the border plus the padding plus whatever the content width, right? So you have the width here of 200 pixels, right? But then you have a padding of 20, and you have a margin of 30, and then you have a border of 50. Then you have to add everything up, right, to know exactly what the total width that this is taking up on your page, right? And obviously you can control each one independently, top, right, left. Yes. I'm sorry. Oh. I forget. CSS margin, border, padding, right, configures the space between the boxes, borders, configures the thickness, color, padding, width, height. And the actual width and height, right, is the combination of all these above. Did I answer that? Well, they control different things, right? So if you have the this particular username here, if you right click on any element, right, and then you ask for an inspector, right, you have a tool that all browsers have, and this is going to be your best friend for the semester. You're gonna be living in this for quite a while. You see exactly what the content has been interpreted by the browser. The browser has parsed the ASCII HTML document, right, and created this model on the left-hand side. This is what we refer to as the DOM, right? This is the document object model representation, in its memory, how it interpreted the ASCII code. And so for every one anything that renders any square or any rectangular area, you have all three margin, border, and padding that you can control individually. So for the border, you can style here the border, and maybe you want it to be solid, and you want it to be color black, and color and the size of 2 pixels, right? And you can increase the pixel, all by itself, right? So that's the border, right? You can specify also the margin that controls the spacing between whatever content and the next content, anything outside, right? So we can say margin to the right-hand side, margin right. I want to push Joe over to my right-hand side. I want to push him over 25 pixels. Right? So that creates space in between the username and Joe. But also I might want to make some space between the border and myself internally, right? So I can control the padding internally to be 5 pixels, right? And I can increase that all by itself, right? So I have full control over inside, outside, right, and my surroundings. Okay, right? So that controls all 4. The only thing that you can color is the border. Everything else you cannot choose the color, right? Everything else is just plain old transparent, right? Whatever the background is. All right. Anyway, so you see the object model here tells you exactly, so you can controller, and you can play around with the styling. Once you like this styling, you can grab this and paste it in your style sheet, right? So it becomes permanent. Otherwise, if you refresh, everything goes away. It goes back to its original set. All right. All right. Excellent. CSS. The very last thing is, let's see, for Bootstrap.